There is a small island in the Western Pacific that makes the chips inside every iPhone, every AI server, every modern weapon system on Earth. It is a functioning democracy. It has been called a province by its neighbor for 75 years. And right now, the one military power that might defend it is fighting a war on the other side of the world. This is Taiwan, and almost nothing about its situation is simple. To understand Taiwan today, you need to understand what it has survived. The island was inhabited by Austronesian peoples for thousands of years before the first Europeans arrived. The Dutch established a colonial foothold in 1624. They were expelled in 1662 by Koxinga, a Ming loyalist who turned Taiwan into his last redoubt. His descendants were conquered by the Qing dynasty in 1683. For 2 centuries, Taiwan was administered from the mainland, sparsely, incompletely, and often violently. In 1895, the Qing ceded Taiwan to Japan, following their defeat in the First Sino-Japanese War. Japan ruled the island for 50 years, building infrastructure, imposing education, and suppressing resistance. When Japan surrendered in 1945, Taiwan passed to the Republic of China, the nationalist government led by Chiang Kai-shek. 4 years later, everything changed. In 1949, the communists defeated the nationalists in the Chinese Civil War. Chiang's government, his army, and roughly 2 million soldiers and civilians fled to Taiwan. They brought with them the claim that they were the legitimate government of all of China, and they imposed martial law on the island that would last for 38 years, the longest martial law in recorded modern history. Then slowly, something unexpected happened. Taiwan democratized, not under external pressure, but from within. Through protests, through opposition movements, through a generation that had grown up on the island and called it home. In 1996, Taiwan held its first direct presidential election, a genuine, competitive, internationally observed vote. In an era when China was growing more authoritarian, Taiwan was growing more free. Today, Taiwan is a liberal democracy of 23.3 million people. It has a free press, an independent judiciary, and regular peaceful transfers of power. In survey after survey, somewhere between 60 and 90% of its population identify as Taiwanese, not Chinese. Public identification with China stands at only 6.5%. Support for unification at barely 10.8%, 70%. That is Taiwan's share of the global semiconductor foundry market. A single company on a single island making the chips that the entire modern world runs on. The story of Taiwan's semiconductor industry begins in 1987 when an engineer named Morris Chang founded Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, in the Hsinchu Science Park. The idea was deceptively simple. Instead of designing chips, the company would only make them. A pure-play foundry. A manufacturer for everyone else's designs. It turned out to be one of the most consequential industrial decisions of the 20th century. Today, TSMC is the world's 6th largest company by market capitalization, valued at approximately 1.9 trillion US dollars as of April 2026. In 2025, it generated $122.54 billion in revenue, up 36% from the year before. Its net profit margin is 45%. And its nearest competitor, Samsung, holds just 7.2% of the global foundry market. TSMC's share, almost 70%. The company makes chips for every major technology firm in the world. Apple, Nvidia, AMD, Broadcom, Qualcomm, the processors in iPhones, the graphics cards running AI models, the fire control computers and the most advanced military systems. All of it flows through fabs that sit within range of Chinese artillery. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has described the concentration of advanced chip production in Taiwan as the single biggest threat to the world economy. TSMC is now building factories in Arizona, Japan, and Germany, a deliberate effort to diversify supply chains away from a geopolitical flashpoint. But those factories produce older processes. The most advanced nodes, the 2-nanometer chips that will power the next generation of AI, are still made in Taiwan. A disruption to Taiwan's semiconductor industry would not merely be an inconvenience, it would be a civilizational shock. No country or company can replicate what TSMC does in the near term. Not China, not the United States, not South Korea. The geographic concentration of this technology is without precedent in modern industrial history. Over the Taiwan Strait, an axe has hung for 75 years. But in recent years, it has moved closer. Since 1949, the People's Republic of China has maintained that Taiwan is an inalienable part of Chinese territory. a province that has not yet been reunified. Beijing has never used force to enforce that claim, but it has never abandoned it either. What has changed is the pace and scale of military pressure. Since the inauguration of Taiwanese President William Lai Ching-te in May 2024, the PLA has conducted large-scale exercises around the island with increasing frequency. In December 2025, China launched what it called Justice Mission 2025, a 2-day blockade simulation involving at least 14 warships, 14 Coast Guard vessels, an amphibious assault strike group, and 130 military aircraft. It was the 7th major exercise of this kind since 2022. PLA drones released footage of Taipei 101. China's own state media described it as a rehearsal for sealing Taiwan's ports. The exercise did not use aircraft carriers. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War noted this was likely because the exercise practiced only part of a larger blockade operation, the part that does not require carriers. On a near-daily basis, PLA aircraft crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait. The purpose is twofold: to erode Taiwan's threat awareness through normalization and to signal displeasure with Taiwanese government decisions. In March 2025, President Lai announced a 17-point national security plan, including new anti-espionage laws and a restoration of military tribunals. A PRC state-affiliated firm, Golaxy, had compiled surveillance files on 170 Taiwanese politicians, including the president himself, for what China's own documents described as cognitive warfare operations. The files were published by Doublethink Lab and Vanderbilt University in 2025. At the same time, Taiwan's opposition, the Kuomintang, has blocked Lai's proposed $40 billion special defense budget in the legislature. The KMT's new chairwoman has accepted an invitation from Xi Jinping to visit Beijing. A bipartisan group of U.S. senators flew to Taipei in March 2026, specifically to urge the legislature to pass the budget. The KMT did not immediately move. The military balance is stark. China's 2025 defense budget was $247 billion. Taiwan's 2026 defense budget, after a 16% increase, is $31 billion. China has more than 2 million active military personnel. Taiwan has 170,000. Taiwan cannot match the PLA in a symmetric conventional war. Its strategy depends on deterrence through cost, making any invasion so expensive, so uncertain, and so internationally consequential that it does not happen. What does it actually feel like to live under an existential threat you have grown up with? Justice Mission 2025 was the 7th major Chinese military exercise around Taiwan since 2022. The Taiwanese people were aware of it. It was on the news. It circulated on social media. And then people went back to work. The hairdresser in New Taipei kept cutting hair. The flower shop owner said the atmosphere felt more serious, but customers drifted in and out as usual. Polling data from the Brookings Institution shows that just under 65% of Taiwanese were worried about a cross-strait war as of 2023, a moderate increase from 57% in 2021. A 2025 poll from the World United Formosans for Independence found that 90% of Taiwanese have an unfavorable impression of China. A 19-year-old university student told Al Jazeera she had considered writing a will, and then went back to studying. What distinguishes Taiwan is not the absence of fear, it is the refusal to let fear be the organizing principle of daily life. After so many exercises, so many warnings, so many rehearsals, a significant portion of the population has arrived at a kind of rational numbness. The threat is real. The threat is not today. Life continues. What actually troubles the Taiwanese public in daily political life is something different. It is domestic. The deadlock between the ruling DPP and the opposition KMT, the blocked defense budget, the attempted impeachment of President Lai, a first in modern Taiwanese history, the question of whether Taiwan's democracy is strong enough to navigate the next crisis, not just the one China is planning. Beneath the geopolitical drama, Taiwan faces a quieter crisis that shares its structure with countries across East Asia. Taiwan's total fertility rate stands at 0.9, among the lowest on Earth, below even Japan's 1.2. More than 20% of Taiwan's population is now over 65. By 2060, the elderly will constitute over 41% of the total population. To keep its economy running, Taiwan has followed the path many of its neighbors know well, importing labor through managed temporariness. As of January 2026, there are 870,587 migrant workers in Taiwan, employed primarily in manufacturing, construction, home care, and fishing. Most come from Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines, and Thailand. They make up the structural foundation of industries that Taiwanese workers increasingly decline to do. The political framing in Taipei has long mirrored Tokyo's. Taiwan is not an immigration country. Migrant workers are admitted under fixed-term contracts, restricted in their ability to change employers, and systematically excluded from permanent residency pathways. Around 94,000 undocumented migrant workers were estimated to be in Taiwan as of September 2025. Workers who stayed beyond their contracts, often because conditions made returning home financially impossible. In 2025, the cabinet approved expanded quotas for migrant workers in manufacturing and hospitality. Labor groups pushed back immediately, asking the question that recurs whenever this debate surfaces: is this a labor shortage or a wage shortage? The Taiwan Labor Front's Secretary General asked publicly whether employers were seeking cheaper workers rather than fixing the structural failure to offer wages that attract domestic applicants. Taiwan's National Development Council estimates a shortage of approximately 114,000 mid-skilled workers, more than half of the country's total projected labor deficit. A country that needs workers to run its semiconductor supply chain and its elder care system simultaneously is not in a position to treat migration as a footnote to national security. While Taiwan watches the axe overhead, the security architecture it depends on has been pulled in another direction. Since early 2026, the United States has been conducting a military campaign against Iran. The war has required diverting American military resources, aircraft carriers, THAAD missile interceptors, precision munitions, toward the Strait of Hormuz. According to Bloomberg reporting from March 2026, the U.S. has already shifted major weapons assets from Asia to the Middle East. Questions about weapons reserves were raised during a closed-door congressional briefing on March 3rd. The Georgetown Journal of International Affairs described the operational reality directly. The Iran war has required diverting American military resources, political attention, and logistical capacity from the Indo-Pacific theater, weakening U.S. defensive capabilities in the Western Pacific. For Taiwan, this is not abstract. The island is over 95% dependent on seaborne imports for its oil and liquefied natural gas. Its strategic gas reserve amounts to between 8 and 11 days. Its oil stockpile covers approximately 100 days. A blockade that interrupted those supplies would not need to fire a single shot to produce a crisis. China is already running disinformation campaigns. AI-generated videos claiming Taiwan faces a devastating energy supply crisis, designed to weaken public confidence before any future military pressure. Some analysts argue the Iran war has paradoxically strengthened Taiwan's position. The U.S. military demonstration in the Middle East showed operational capability that appears to have given Beijing pause. Chinese military equipment supplied to Iran and Venezuela performed poorly against U.S. systems. The PLA is simultaneously undergoing an unprecedented internal purge. 9 senior military officials, including several generals, were removed at the 2026 National People's Congress. According to the American Enterprise Institute and the Institute for the Study of War, the PLA's combat readiness for any Taiwan contingency is genuinely uncertain. Time magazine reported in March 2026 that Chinese Premier Li Qiang upgraded Beijing's Taiwan language from opposing separatism to resolutely cracking down on it. But China's 2026 GDP growth target, 4.5 to 5%, is the lowest in decades. Economic underperformance constrains military adventurism. A Taiwan Strait war would temporarily halt cargo shipping along China's entire east coast. The strategic picture is not a binary of safe or lost. It is a shifting probability distribution, shaped simultaneously by U.S. military capacity, Chinese military readiness, the duration of the Iran conflict, the state of Taiwan's domestic politics, and the personal calculations of Xi Jinping, whose purges have transformed the Central Military Commission from a decision-making body to an extension of his individual will. Foreign Affairs published an assessment in February 2026 stating that the Chinese policy community is increasingly convinced that asserting control of Taiwan will happen. The identified driver: the perception that Trump has little interest in defending Taiwan militarily. Trump himself said in January 2026 that if Xi attempted to seize Taiwan, he would be very unhappy, while also stating the question is up to him. Trump delayed announcing a second arms package to avoid disrupting a planned summit with Xi. That summit has since been postponed because of the Iran war. The KMT opposition continues to block the $40 billion defense budget that U.S. senators flew to Taipei to support. The island waits. Taiwan has survived more than most countries can imagine. Dutch colonizers, Qing annexation, Japanese occupation, nationalist martial law, 38 years of it. And out of all of that, it built a democracy, a semiconductor industry that the world depends on, and a civic identity that 90% of its population defends against the claims of its largest neighbor. What it has not resolved, and what no one outside Taiwan can resolve for it, is the fundamental question of its future. The axe is real. The 70% global chip market share is real. The 870,000 migrant workers filling demographic gaps in silence is real. The depleted U.S. munitions stockpile and the stalled defense budget, and the PLA exercises rehearsing blockades are all real. Simultaneously, in April 2026, Taiwan is not a crisis waiting to happen. It is a condition that has been ongoing for 75 years and is not yet resolved. What changes is not the condition, but the tolerance of the major actors for that condition continuing. The 180-kilometer strait that separates Taiwan from the mainland is the most consequential body of water on Earth, not because of what is in it, because of what stands on both sides of it.